Our next speaker, distinguished speaker, is Ambassador Christian Strohal, who has served since 2008 as the permanent representative to the United Nations office in Geneva. And his current function include the Vice President of the UN Human Rights Council and the President of the International Organization for Migration. Ambassador, it's a pleasure to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Which book? Okay, thank you. Well, thank you so much, and delighted to be here. I guess this is about change and how to make it more dynamic and less fragile, and what is the best role you can play in that change. Certainly my role has been made much easier by Commissioner Füle and Minister Olsson, who have made a very clear catalogue of the challenges which we are facing in the Eastern Partnership and in the field of human rights. So maybe I can use this opportunity to concentrate on that question, the role of civil society, and how to make this as dynamic and as effective and as concrete as possible. And I would like to compare from my experience in the OSCE framework with now where I am at the UN, where dynamics are more governmental maybe than in the OSCE, and look at essentially three things. Mapping the future means also mapping the present and tracking the past. And if I start with tracking the past, then I would my point of argument would be that the role of civil society can be tracked, I think, to every single initiative in the field of human rights which has been taken over the last 60 years. Be it international treaties, international institutions, mechanisms and processes, all of those developments can be tracked back to the input from civil society, input from an NGO, input from an NGO coalition, input from academics. And so that is, I think, the really good news. The civil society has proven that you are excellent in getting things started, in bringing new ideas, and in getting the ball rolling. That is not only the case, of course, in the UN, but that is, of course, also the case at the local level, at the global as well as at the local level. So if we look at mapping the present, same thing. I think the role of civil society, I don't have to tell you how indispensable you are in mapping the present. You bring the reality check, as we have just heard, to politicians. You bring not only a voice, but also you monitor, you advocate, you criticize, you create a public conscience, and you can act. So there again, I think the good news is that you are so effective that there are governments who are actually trying to make you less effective. And we should not forget that as we are sitting here, one of your colleagues is in prison and his office has been dismantled only yesterday. I think that sort of example of silencing the voice, of silencing the reality check, of shooting the messenger, will not make the message go away. And I think that is what makes it possible to continue that work of mapping the present. So the good news is your role is strong. The bad news is that the reality you are bringing is not as good as it should be. So if we then turn to mapping the future, maybe a key question is how to ensure the necessary engagement between civil society and the political processes. That means not only bringing the reality check, but following up and following through on the proposals you are making with the political processes within countries and among countries. How to strengthen your own professionalism, how to strengthen the capacity to create trust and sustainability, as we have heard, both in the national and in the international arena. And maybe I take one concrete example from the UN framework, where of course things have also evolved quite dynamically in the field of rule of law and human rights, more than the field of democracy promotion. But maybe I take one concrete example, which is the sort of defining, or one of the defining features of the Human Rights Council vis-à-vis its predecessor, and that has this strange word name of Universal Periodic Review. Behind those words is hidden a peer review of all 193 UN member states, checking on each other's human rights record in a cycle of 4.5 years. So it is a peer review, which means it is intergovernmental. And the criticism when this was created was precisely concentrating on that fact, that one crow will not hack the eye of another one. The interesting thing about these last 4 years when we have been through this are several. First of all, and most importantly, I think also for you, is the role of civil society in that process. You can't speak and drink at the same time. That means that it is a peer review, yes, but civil society is being involved before, during, and after. That means in the preparatory process of the country concerned, of the report it produces, there is a parallel report from civil society, national and international, also going to Geneva, and very much informing the questions and recommendations other governments are asking. Of course, there is a speaking role also for civil society representatives in the process itself in Geneva. And thirdly, there is a role in the follow-up, because that is, again, that is where the proof of the pudding is. If there is a meaningful follow-up or not by the government vis-à-vis the recommendations they have received. In the course of the dialogue which takes place in Geneva, there is typically 100 recommendations, more or less, made to every single government. The government can reject them or can accept them. Most recommendations are accepted. And then they go home. And then the interesting thing starts, really, because then it's up to everybody, not only other governments, but of course also civil society, to make sure that at least the recommendations which are accepted are being implemented, and that those which are not are being argued why they have not been accepted. And 4 years later, there is another possibility to check on that implementation. Of course, 4 years is a long time, but it is an ongoing process. So my point is really that this provides a new avenue for continued engagement between civil society and government, and therefore facilitates this follow-up and follow-through, which I think is so important for mapping the future. With that, I think just in terms of concluding and outlook, a question or two. I think we will have in what 2.5 years or 3 years 40 years of Helsinki. Helsinki was made by the Helsinki spirit. And I think the question is legitimate, where is the spirit now? It's certainly in this room. I'm not so sure if it is with governments as much as it was in Helsinki, and certainly not as much as it should be today. And so I think there is a need to use that, to prepare a new Helsinki spirit with a new and stronger partnership between government, civil society, and international institutions. The Eastern Partnership program is certainly and should be a model for such a partnership. It has all the ingredients for success, but its success is not yet there. And I think that is an encouragement to you, not only to use that sort of framework which is provided, but also to use the experience from this framework in other fora and to bring in governments as much and as many and as often as you can in the framework of this partnership, in the framework of the OSCE and the Council of Europe, and of course of the United Nations. Thank you very much.
Ambassador, great thanks. And I would like to invite our members to ask questions. And when you prepare your questions, please keep in mind that Ambassador has been dealing with human rights issues for a really long time, and he was also the director of the ODIHR, the well-known to all of you organization, the Democratic Institution for Human Rights and of the OSCE. So please keep that in mind when you ask questions, because I'm sure that Ambassador is well familiar with our region and will be happy to comment. Please, who would go first?
Спасибо, я вопрос буду задавать на русском языке. Okay.
Sorry, I don't have enough knowledge.
Yeah,
no translation. I don't get translation here. Sorry.
Okay, I can continue. Okay. Артур Сакунц, Хельсинская гражданская ассамблея, Ванадзорский офис, Армения. У меня вопрос перевод есть? Ага. У меня вопрос касается доклада БДИПЧ насчет Артур Сакунц, Ванадзорский офис Хельсинской гражданской ассамблеи, Армения. Мой вопрос касается репортом, докладом БДИПЧ по результатам выборов. И очередной раз БДИПЧ считал нецелесообразным внесение изменений в избирательный кодекс Армении перед президентским выбором. Но у нас большие сомнения насчет того, что из-за недостатков избирательном кодексе не будет обеспечены свободные и справедливые выборы. И сейчас гражданское общество в Армении очень двояком ситуации. С одной стороны, мы требуем от властей, а власти говорят, что БДИПЧ считает нецелесообразным внесение изменений в избирательном кодексе. Я хотел бы получить непосредственно от вас комментарии. В таком ситуации, когда после парламентских выборов 6 мая БДИПЧ выдвигал ряд рекомендаций по изменению в избирательном кодексе, власти не изменяют, мы требуем, а сейчас ссылаются на позицию БДИПЧ. Как вы комментировали бы ситуацию? Спасибо.
Thank you. Спасибо. Садрак Багдасарян, victims of state needs in Armenia. Я хочу присоединиться к высказанному, значит, господином Сакунцем, привести яркий пример, как гражданина, который не имел права, был лишен права выборов, как в 2008, так и в мае к парламентским выборам. Яркий пример, значит, закон, который не позволил мне участвовать, не только мне, но и другим гражданам Армении участвовать в выборах. Предстоящие президентские выборы мы также лишены этого права. Я бы во время рабочей, значит, встречи хотел бы более детально с вами обговорить, потому что по этому вопросу наша организация представила Женеву, значит, судебный иск. И мне было бы интересно побеседовать с вами на эту тему. Спасибо.
Sure. Thank you very much for both questions, and we'll have an opportunity later this morning to discuss election-related issues more in detail. Electoral legislation and its role certainly is crucial, and electoral legislation are quite a complex animal in the legislative, not only product, but also in the legislative process of any and every country. And we have been seeing a number of international institutions accompanying that process, these processes throughout and over the years. The ODIHR, the Council of Europe, the Venice Commission, mostly together. There is no blueprint. There is, I remember moments when there were governments who went to international organizations and said, do us an electoral law. And international organizations rightly refused. They said, this is your law, this is not our law. Every law is different, but we can help you with expertise. What are the key elements in an electoral legislation? And also the second part of your question with regard to changing legislation, of course, in terms of making it comply with international commitments is one thing. Another one is to ensure the voter confidence necessary to conduct democratic elections. And the third one, of course, is to provide the necessary political framework for a level playing field of all candidates, provide the necessary basis for an inclusive voter registration, and provide the necessary basis for the effective and professional and impartial administration of the electoral process, and provide the basis for oversight and redress vis-à-vis identified shortcomings of failures. So there is no question that electoral legislation is a key factor, but so is the implementation. Some countries have electoral law which are as complex as quantum physics and still very flawed electoral processes. So it's a necessary but not sufficient ingredient for democratic elections, but certainly one in which, again, the importance of civil society involvement, not only in terms of making sure that the legislation is there and is being implemented, but also in terms of giving you a role. One cannot overestimate the importance of domestic election observation, and of course also that has to happen on the basis of a clear legal framework.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We are also looking forward to have you as a speaker at the election workshop. And as you know, within the first working group, there is a subgroup on election observation which has been created. And we really look forward to your advice exactly on how the role of civil society can be strengthened in the election observation process. Thank you very much once again.
Well, thank you. And maybe, I mean, election observation has become quite a professional and long-term exercise. I mean, at the ODIHR, I remember one election, the observation of one election took us a year. in preparing, in looking at the framework, and in looking at the long-term campaign, in looking at the elections themselves, and at the follow-up. So 1 year is a long time for anybody to observe an election. So I think there is a need to look at what needs to be done by whom. Secondly, of course, elections are only the tip of the iceberg of the democratic process. And so election observation is also only the tip of the iceberg of what should more and more become democracy monitoring and democracy observation. And I think there is a real challenge for all of us.
Thank you, Ambassador.